Teachers do want to be in a supportive, connected community, not a bureaucracy. A great irony, the larger the school, the more narrowly they measure achievement and success. That's Grauer's law. It's documented in so many places. And it's the narrow outcomes that teachers are citing as their reasons for leaving the profession. Number 13, is there research about home values when a neighborhood school is removed? Uh, I don't know. The Grauer School has 160 students, and last year 6 families moved from other states or countries in order to enroll. Obviously, that's an extraordinary situation. That does not seem like data you might get from a large school, except in the case where a major student athlete program exists. Top ranked basketball players might move, for instance. 14, does a new school building increase home values when it's near homes, or does that matter? Good schools can increase home values in some measure. Good schools provide stability for a community, and that's good for the property values of everyone who lives nearby. We have to stop evaluating our schools in terms of standardized test scores, though. And this is why people are leaving the profession and students feel disengaged, even if the data enables those schools to brag to realtors that they have great schools. If I have only one message for you today, for the health and the happiness and the lives of your kids, I urge you to define the value and success of your schools and teachers in terms of student engagement, belongingness, purposefulness, safety, and joy. It's not true that we can't measure those either. We can, but measuring narrow goals like class rank and standardized achievement test scores does not bring happiness or better schools. That's the factory model. 15, and you're hanging in there really well. We're on the home stretch now, so thank you. That's 15 out of 18. Do good schools create jobs, lessening the burden on property tax owners? Economists have, this is New York Times says, economists have estimated that within suburban neighborhoods, a 5% improvement in test scores can raise prices by 2.5%. And small schools show higher test scores. Here, the confusion and trouble, again, is when people confuse property values with quality of life. The only reason people do not consider trade-offs between happiness and higher test scores is that they don't even think about it. Schools don't talk about that data, and they can, and I hope they will. Once you hear that data, you can no longer ignore it. Number 16, with having multiple elementary schools, how do districts address enrollment disparities? Schools address enrollment disparities by district boundary shifts, and they do that all the time. But they must provide petitioning options for families being affected, especially if those shifts break up families or neighborhoods, or take individual students away from coveted programs. And this happens in all districts on some level. Number 17, with having multiple elementary schools rather than a consolidated school, how do teachers effectively coordinate? Elementary schools and many schools do not really need to coordinate much with one another. Each school operates autonomously. That's what great principals want. A great principal can't operate that well otherwise. The action is in the classroom. That's where students and teachers' eyes meet. It's on the playground where kids connect with friends and neighbors. However, small schools find it increasingly easy these days to share resources. Many districts, large and small, have itinerant teachers, aides, and staff. They communicate, they commute, the itinerants commute. Why have the students commute if you can have a small handful of specialist teachers commute? Plus, obviously, as is happening right now, technology enables some courses to be taught online, and districts can purchase resources, in some cases even fields, to share. And 18, with having multiple elementary schools, How do districts adequately provide services and travel from building to building? If you want to be all things to all people, build very large comprehensive schools. Every single student will have every single resource. The greatest fallacy in all of schooling is that we solve problems by creating more programs. Every new learning challenge or problem gets a task force and a program. Everything becomes like a system to be administered. But that's not what great teachers do. Teaching is a relationship between a student and a teacher. It's sacred, not be systematized, but it can be developed. That's the program. At bigger schools, more special needs cases keep popping up. Why is that? Is it true that there is some special learning? It is true that there is some special learning needs that some students may have to be bused to be addressed, or that we may need to bring an itinerant specialist for. But if you design your school to address every special learning need or to prevent every lawsuit, you get an impersonal bureaucracy. I understand that these are painful choices, sometimes with legal implications. Nowhere is it more true than in safety programs. There are always concerns of people who do not actually work with kids and who think in systems and not relationships. Larger districts devote a greater percentage of their operating budgets to security than smaller districts do. Metal detectors, on-campus police, large school security measures, and gang prevention are all costs that small schools largely avoid, and yet they maintain safer school environments than larger schools with all those measures in place. So I just want to cap off whether or not a mega campus is cheaper to operate, has a greater economy of scale than multiple small schools. And here we have two clear studies. One by Howley of Ohio University found that smaller schools allocate 26% more space to each student. Grades 9 through 12 schools of 136 to 600 students were no more expensive per student to build than students for schools between 600 and 1,000 students. And grade 9 through 12 schools of 138 through 600 students were less costly to operate per square foot than larger schools, $96 per square foot versus 110. Howley's conclusion was, do not expect operating cost savings from consolidation. The New Rules Project studied this question and concluded in one of my favorite all-time sentences: the cost savings of larger schools are only apparent if the results are ignored. The United States public school system has the fifth most expensive cost of education in the world. And despite this ample fiscal investment, students lag behind academically, taking 26th place in math in the global arena. In contrast, where schools of 300 students or less were considered, we would find that American schools reside at the top of any international ranking. Research has shown that formulas for determining funding disguise tremendous non-cash costs associated closely with large schools. And some of those costs are difficult to affix a price tag to, and some of them include terrible social costs. Large school increased costs include increased dropout rates, increased violence, decreased sense of social safety, lower teacher satisfaction and higher teacher turnover, lower achievement in college, less happiness, and at present the above costs are seldom considered to be actuarial realities. Compare small schools of less than 300 with big schools at more than 1,000. Reveals research that shows that bigger schools have 270% more vandalism, 378% more theft and larceny, 394% more physical fights, 825% more violent crime, 1,000% more weapons incidents, 3,200% more robberies. In other words, 32 times the amount of robberies. This is from Lawrence and Lawrence in a study called dollars and cents the cost effectiveness of small schools. That is a 174-page report following the terrible Columbine, Colorado shooting disaster. Acknowledges that the task of coping with school rage is difficult at large schools where students tend to feel marginalized and less a part of school community. That commission concluded that it's difficult for administrators in large schools to create a supportive atmosphere. So thank you for listening. I'm not trying to speak primarily for only those who already agree with me. I'm speaking to whoever you are out there. I have no agenda for Bowling Green. I respect any path you want to take. I only think that small schools, in small schools, the voiceless, the student in the back row. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah.
The student in the back row and the communities that want close connection, that small schools like that deserve a hearing. Students are not cost units. In America, it's common to try to solve problems by trying to make things bigger and more bureaucratic, and it's hard to keep things on the community level. I really appreciate that. Bigger systems are not more efficient, caring, or economical. So I also understand in conclusion that if you choose to stay small, you may feel you're going against the mainstream or have a politically chosen difficult road, especially against people who have not looked at the research, which is almost everybody. But I've received many letters from people like you who are very happy that they have kept their local community intact. So thank you all again.
Thank
You've
you.
done one. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. I just have one question. You talk a lot about high schools in this. Would you say that smaller schools are just as equally advantageous for our younger children in the same ways that they are for older children or older
Yeah,
teenagers?
absolutely. I've cited some cases all schools, and in other cases just large schools, because um, large schools need the help more. I get
Uh-huh.
more calls from them. It's very common to take elementary schools and then feed them into consolidated middle schools or high schools, and so the average size of elementary schools is so much smaller that I'm trying to provide research to those who need it most. But
Okay.
the sense of safety and connectedness and teachers' relationships and it holds exactly true, and particularly the teacher's complaint that in larger schools they have to focus on narrower and narrower bureaucratic priorities in order to prove their worth.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I think that this will end the public meeting. If you could just hang out for a second, that would be great, Stuart.
Okay.
And that would be it. So thank you all for
Thank you,
coming.
everybody.
Stuart says thank you. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you found this very informational, and I hope that it helps inform your vote. So, great.